You've been doing everything right. You wake up early, go to work, push through long hours, and at the end of the month, you still feel like nothing really changed. Your savings go up a little, then suddenly drop again because life just happens. A broken phone, unexpected bills, something always resets your progress. Look, it's frustrating because from the outside, it looks like you're being responsible. You're not reckless. You're not wasting money. And yet, there's this constant feeling that you're stuck in the same place financially. Now you might be thinking, maybe I just need to save more. But here's the thing. What if the problem isn't how much you save, but how you structure your money? Because most people are told to just build an emergency fund without ever understanding what that actually means for their real life. And that confusion? That's exactly why so many people feel like they're moving, but never actually getting ahead. My name is Demas, and I spend way too much time thinking about money. If you're someone who feels stuck financially, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Now let's get into it. We're talking about emergency cash, but not in the way you've probably heard before, because most advice out there sounds simple. Almost too simple. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's it. No context, no explanation, no strategy behind it. Look, on the surface, that sounds responsible, safe, even smart. But here's what most people don't realize. That number was never designed specifically for you. It doesn't know your job situation, your responsibilities, or how stable your income really is. And yet, people follow it like it's a universal rule. This is where it gets really interesting. Because once you start questioning that assumption, you realize that emergency funds aren't just about having money saved. They're about making better decisions under pressure, and that changes everything. So let's talk about the advice you've probably heard over and over again. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses. On paper, it sounds solid. It gives you a clear target. It feels like you're being disciplined, responsible. But look, this is where things start to break down. Because that rule assumes your life is predictable, that your expenses stay the same, that your job is stable, that emergencies follow a neat, expected timeline. And that's just not how real life works. Here's what most people don't realize. That 3 to 6 month number isn't some perfectly calculated formula. It's a general guideline based on averages across millions of people. Different jobs, different incomes, different risks, all blended into one number. And when you apply an average to your specific life, you create blind spots. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't it better to just be safe? Sure, but being safe without being precise can actually slow you down, because you might end up saving way more cash than you actually need, while missing opportunities to grow your money elsewhere. And that's the hidden trade-off no one talks about. So let's ground this in reality for a second. According to data from the Federal Reserve, around 37% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency without borrowing or selling something. That's not a major crisis. That's a minor inconvenience turning into a financial problem. Now layer that with another data point. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the average unemployment duration is about 20 weeks. That's roughly 5 months without steady income. Now you might be thinking, okay, so the 3 to 6 month rule actually makes sense. And yeah, it kind of does. But here's the thing. Those numbers don't know you. They don't account for whether your job is easy to replace or highly specialized. They don't consider if you have side income, family support, or fixed obligations that can't be reduced. This is where it gets really interesting. Because once you stop looking at averages and start looking at your actual numbers, the picture changes fast. Let's say you currently spend about $2,500 a month living your normal life. But in a real emergency, you're not living normally. You cut back. You prioritize survival. And that number might drop closer to $1,800, which means the emergency fund you actually need could be very different from what you originally thought. Now let's talk about something most people completely ignore when building an emergency fund. The cost of playing it too safe. Because keeping money in cash feels smart. It feels secure. You can see it, access it, and rely on it any time. But here's the thing. That sense of safety comes with a hidden price. Opportunity cost. Let's say you decide to hold $15,000 in cash, just sitting in your bank account. It's there for emergencies, which sounds responsible. but at the same time, that money isn't doing anything for you. Now compare that to investing. Historically, the market returns around 7% per year on average. That means your $15,000 could potentially grow by about $1,050 in a single year. And over time, that gap compounds. This is where it gets really interesting. Because the decision isn't just about safety anymore, it's about trade-offs. Every extra dollar you keep in cash is a dollar that's not growing. Now you might be thinking, so should I just invest everything? Not exactly, because going all in on investing creates a different risk. Entirely, being forced to sell when the market is down. And that's the real tension. You're not choosing between right and wrong. You're choosing between different kinds of risk. Now this is where things go deeper than just numbers. Because your decision about how much emergency cash to hold isn't purely logical. It's psychological. Look, humans aren't wired to make perfectly rational financial decisions. We're wired to avoid pain, and that's where loss aversion comes in. The pain of losing money feels about twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining it. So even if investing makes sense long-term, your brain still leans toward holding cash because it feels safer. Now add instant gratification into the mix. Saving cash gives you immediate control. You can see the number go up, you can access it any time, and it feels like progress. Investing, on the other hand, requires patience, and patience is uncomfortable when results aren't immediate. Then there's risk tolerance. Some people can watch their investments drop 10% and stay calm. Others panic and sell at the worst possible time. Here's what most people don't realize. Your emergency fund isn't just protecting your money, it's protecting your behavior. Because when you don't have that safety net, you're far more likely to make emotional decisions under pressure, and those decisions are usually the ones that set you back the most. Now here's where the perspective really starts to shift, because wealthy people don't think about emergency funds the same way most people do. They don't ask, how much cash should I have sitting in my bank account? They ask something completely different. How resilient is my financial life? Look, cash is just one layer of protection. It's important, but it's not the whole system. Here's what most people don't realize. Financial security doesn't come from one number. It comes from how all the pieces work together. Things like how stable your income is, whether you have multiple income streams, how high your fixed expenses are, and how quickly you can adapt when something goes wrong. This is where it gets really interesting, because someone with a stable 9-to-5 job, low expenses, and no debt might only need 3 months of cash. But someone who is self-employed, with unpredictable income and higher responsibilities, might need 9 months, or even more. Same concept, completely different strategy. And that's the shift. You stop copying general advice and start designing a system that actually fits your life. All right, so let's turn all of this into something you can actually use. Because at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, I get the idea, but what should I do? Here's the thing. You don't need a perfect number. You need a clear structure. Start with this. Figure out your survival expenses, not your current lifestyle, your minimum. What does it cost to keep your life running if things go wrong? Rent, basic food, transportation, essential bills, that's your baseline. Next, look at your income stability. Be honest. If you lost your job today, how long would it realistically take to replace that income? Weeks, months, longer? Then check your debt situation. If you're carrying high-interest debt like credit cards, it doesn't make sense to hoard cash while interest is working against you. This is where it gets really practical. Build your emergency fund in levels, not all at once. Start with a small buffer, maybe $1,000, then grow it to 1 to 2 months of expenses, then 3 to 6 months depending on your situation. Think of it like building a foundation. You don't pour everything at once. You build it layer by layer, making sure each level is stable before moving up. And that approach? It keeps you moving forward without feeling stuck. Now let's bring this all together. Because at the end of the day, this isn't really about hitting some perfect emergency fund number. It's about control. Look, most people think financial progress is about earning more money or finding the perfect investment. But here's the thing. If your system isn't stable, none of that matters. You'll always feel like one unexpected expense can pull you backwards. One bad month can undo months of progress. Now you might be thinking, so when do I know I have enough? Here's a better way to look at it. You have enough when a problem shows up, And you don't panic. When a bill comes in and you don't have to rearrange your entire life to deal with it. When losing your income temporarily doesn't force you into bad decisions. That's what an emergency fund is really for. It buys you time. It buys you options. And most importantly, it protects you from reacting emotionally when things go wrong. Because here's what most people don't realize. Bad financial decisions rarely happen when things are going well. They happen when you feel pressured, stressed, and unprepared. So don't just aim for a number. Build a system that keeps you calm when everything else isn't. That's how you actually move forward.